All right. So the UAW is officially on strike. They've been on strike since about Thursday at 11:59 p.m. and they're using a pretty interesting strategy right now of only striking, or at least starting off by only striking at specific locations and not telling the big three car companies like Ford, Stellantis, and General Motors where they're going to strike. And then as this strike progresses, they're going to start adding additional locations, and basically it's a way to sort of like confuse the automakers and ramp it up as they go, while also saving some money from the strike fund so that they can be able to draw this out longer and longer. So the strategy that they've been using so far, I think, is brilliant. I think that it's going to be successful in the long term, at least hopefully. But with that being said, I kind of just want to get into some things that have been flying across the timeline over the last couple of days as the strike has officially started. So first, I just want to show you what the leader of the UAW, Shawn Fain, a guy we've talked about before on this channel, what he was saying at the outset of this. Then we're going to get into what some actual workers on the ground have been talking about, and then I'm going to show you guys a couple of clips from the absolute ghouls that are the CEOs of some of these big three car manufacturers, and then also some Republican politician responses that I think have been pretty illuminating in terms of whose side they're really on in this strike. So first, let's just go ahead and hear directly from the big man himself, who's been having a litany of base takes recently. Shawn Fain, let's hear what you got.
It's official. They are officially on strike. We've got Gabe Cohen in Wayne, Michigan right now. You're hearing from Shawn Fain, the UAW president.
And they want to call us greedy. They got the whole thing backwards.
What would you say to the CEOs of these auto companies that say the union has not been acting in good faith, that there were delays? What do you make of that?
Let's talk about what good faith is. They've had our economic demands for 6 weeks. We've told them from day one, we expect a bargain now, not wait till the end. They waited till last week. We had to file unfair labor practice charges on 2 companies to get them to come to the table. So they waited till the last week to want to get down to business. Shame on them, and what they're saying is complete BS.
You heard the CEO of Ford say that it would bankrupt them if they met your demands. What do you think of that?
I think it's a joke. You know what? They could double our pay right now. Labor, the cost of labor that goes into a vehicle is 5% of the vehicle. They could double our wages, and they could not raise the price of vehicles, and they would still make billions of dollars. It's a lie like everything else that comes out of their mouth.
The strategy is 3 facilities. What impact do you think that could make on the auto industry as a whole across this country?
We'll find out. You know what? And it's going to keep on building if they don't come to the table for our members.
More facilities?
All right. So there you go. Obviously, a couple different things that he just touched on there. So when he says that the labor costs that goes into each vehicle that they're manufacturing is only 4 to 5%, this is what he's talking about here. And I think that that was a really important point. He also obviously referenced the statement from the CEO, I think it was of Ford, that we're going to get to here in a second, basically saying that if they meet their demands, they're going to go bankrupt. Completely ridiculous statement by that CEO, and we'll get to that clip here in a second. But first, just to point out what exactly these companies have been spending their money on over the last number of years. So as pointed out here by Jeff, big three by the numbers, a change over the last 4 years, and this contract they're fighting for right now is a contract that's going to last over 4 years as well. So that's why we're talking about this time window. So I mean, look at this. First of all, North American profits up 65%, CEO pay up 40%. Coincidentally, or not coincidentally, this is the exact percentage that they are asking for in terms of actual worker pay rises, 40%. It's to match what the executives have been getting. And then look at this big fat ass line over here, 1,500%. Now, what is that? Stock buybacks. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, stock buybacks used to be illegal. Thank you, I think it was Ronald Reagan who made these legal. And essentially what stock buybacks are is where a company buys back their own stock in order to artificially raise the value of that stock. So it's just stock manipulation. And the reason they dump this much money into this is, number one, obviously to benefit their wealthy Wall Street shareholders, but also, and this is going to tie into another clip that we have from one of these CEOs, the reason why they spend this much on stock buybacks is because the CEO pay is directly connected to the amount that the stock is going up in performance. Okay, so basically there's this incentive with stock buybacks being legal in this country where a lot of these CEOs, a lot of these, executives at these companies have a direct incentive to kind of fuck over the company in the short term, right? Instead of reinvesting these profits back into the actual workers or the productive capabilities of the company, they spend it on stock buybacks because that's how they themselves make their $20-30 million a year salary. It's directly tied to the stock. Okay, so So they've been spending 1,500% more on stock buybacks over this period. And then what he was referencing over here, the UAW top wage rate during this period, up 6%. That doesn't even keep pace with inflation, all right? Only 4 to 5% on labor cost per vehicle. Okay, so this notion that these executives are trying to sell people on, that, oh, we simply cannot afford to pay for what these workers are demanding, it's entirely bullshit. It's right here in the numbers. As he just said, you could double the amount that they're making, and what? We're talking about a marginal increase over here compared to what they're spending on their stock buyback. So when they say they can't afford it, what they're really saying is we can't afford it without taking a haircut on the amount that we are dumping. We're talking about billions and billions of dollars here on the amount that we're dumping into stock manipulation and executive pay. That's what they're really saying. They don't want to cut in to their own personal benefit and the benefit of the wealthy people who are leeching off of the backs of these workers. So with that being said, I want to get to this more perfect union clip of what some of the actual workers on the ground are saying and why exactly they decided to go out on strike. So let's hear it directly from them.
Right now, I'm fired up. I'm ready to go to war. I'm ready to fight for what's mine. We deserve it. I mean, we don't get to see our families, and it's been really rough for us this year. So right now, I'm ready.
It's 2023. Nobody here wants to be living in a van eating cat food down by the river. We're going to retire soon, and we need a fair package.
I feel really good. I feel that when you have the big three refusing to even come halfway to the requirements, it's necessary. This is history.
That parking lot is normally full Monday through Friday. Now it's empty due to the fact that we are on strike. We are fighting for what we deserve.
It's pretty surreal. It's all new to everybody here. None of us have been here before. Unless you've got over 50 years seniority, you haven't been here.
We're fighting for what we deserve through the UAW and for Ford. I'm 100% behind my brothers and sisters with this strike, and hopefully the strike will show Ford that we're not backing down.
All right. So, I mean, again, I think that they're 100% correct. Obviously, solidarity with everybody who is standing out there on the picket line right now. And it does look like the overwhelming majority of the American people are standing in solidarity with these workers. And this is going to be a big fucking problem the longer that this strike goes on and you do start to see some economic consequences as a result from it. This is going to be a problem for the corporations themselves, for the CEOs, the executives, because according here to The Nation, 75% of Americans side with the striking UAW members. And again, you can see why when you actually listen to what the workers are saying, listen to what the union is saying, and then listen to some of these ghouls, these executives and CEOs and what they're actually making and how they're twisting this to try to make it seem as if these workers are being greedy instead of they themselves being the greedy ones in this situation. So with that being said, I want to also make this point that was pointed out here by Matt Karp that I think also needs to be stated. He says, imagine just for a moment we had a Democratic Party or even a left that aimed to polarize politics on this issue rather than literally everything else that you read about today. And so I think he's 100% correct. We did have Joe Biden who basically went out and he gave, I thought it was a decent statement in support of the union where he was basically saying, they're getting, a little bit screwed over and they should be given, fair compensation for the value of their labor. I thought that was a decent statement. Now, does Joe Biden go far enough on labor issues? No, he's got a decent NLRB, but, he has his shortcomings when it comes to labor issues as well, right? Where is the PRO Act? Where is the advocacy or the fight for the PRO Act? We also had Bernie Sanders who was out actually on the picket line, which is something that I have no fucking idea why Joe Biden wouldn't tap into that right now as well. But the point being basically is that this is one of those issues. I mean, 75% of Americans standing by them. You could get the support from this union. You could get more support from working class Americans, which Democrats and Joe Biden himself have been struggling with according to the polling data. Why is this not an issue where you are going 100% to bat and standing out on the picket line with these people and trying to put a lot of public pressure because you have the ability to bully these companies from the podium. Why are you not going out 100% to bat for them? So I think that was also a good point that needed to be made at the same time, just on the political level. Now, with that being said, let's just go ahead and get to some of these CEOs. So here we have the Ford CEO, Jim Farley, and he is going to explain to us why Ford as a company is going to completely dissolve if these workers' demands are met. So let's go ahead and hear him out here.
Quickly put in some perspective, the offer that they have, what they're demanding relative to where you are right now, how much damage would that do to the bottom line if you were to say, sure, we'll give you 40%?
If we signed up for the UAW's request, instead of making money and distributing $75,000 in profit sharing in the last 10 years, we would have lost $15 billion and gone bankrupt by now. The average pay would be nearly $300,000 fully fringed for a 4-day work week. There is no way.
Per UAW employee.
Yeah. This is our fully tenured school teacher in the U.S. makes $66,000. Someone from the military or fireman makes mid-50,000. This is 4 or 5 times, 6 times what they make. There's no way we can be sustainable as a company. That's why we put our proposal in 2 weeks ago to say, look, you want us to choose bankruptcy over supporting our workers? Here's our proposal. Let's work through this.
Okay, so thanks to a More Perfect Union here for making it explicitly clear how bullshit this narrative is. They say the CEO of Ford went on TV to say that the UAW's demands would bankrupt the company. He provides no evidence, which is a good point, right? No actual numbers on what he's saying. He's just saying if we met their demands, we would go bankrupt, and failed to say that he makes $21 million and oversees billions in stock buybacks. Billions in stock buybacks. He also said that the union gave him no counter proposals in the last 2 weeks, which is also a lie, as pointed out there by Sean Fain in the first clip that we watched. They were basically arguing that these companies needed to give them a proposal much sooner than they did, and they had to file an unfair labor practice against these companies to get them to even make a counter proposal. So everything that he just said there was a complete lie. I mean, again, look at the fucking data here. It's not that complicated. If you actually wanted to, prevent bankruptcy for your company, maybe don't spend billions, tens of billions of dollars over a number of years on artificial, stock manipulation for your company and executive pay on top of that. I mean, that narrative is just completely absurd at face value, but it gets even better. So here we have the CEO of General Motors, who is actually being pressed fairly well here by CNN, which is a surprise coming from a network like CNN. But let's go ahead and hear her justify why her salary has skyrocketed over the last number of years, while workers' wages have not kept pace at the same rate.
The union is asking for a 40% wage increase over 4 years. They're asking for that in part because they say CEOs like yourself, leading the big three, are making those kind of pay increases over the course of the last 4 years. You've seen a 34% pay increase in your salary. You make almost $30 million. Why should your workers not get the same type of pay increases that you're getting leading the company?
Well, if you look at compensation, my compensation, 92% of it is based on performance of the company. I think one of the strong aspects of the way our compensation for our represented employees is designed is not only are we putting a 20% increase on the table, we have profit sharing. So when the company does well, everyone does well. And for the last several years, that's resulted in record profit sharing for our represented employees. And I think you have to look at the whole compensation package, not only 20% increase in gross wage, but also the profit sharing aspect of it, world-class health care, and there's several other features. So we think we have a very competitive offer on the table, and that's why we want to get back there and get this done.
But if you're getting a 34% pay increase over 4 years and you're offering 20% to employees right now, do you think that's fair?
Well, I think when you look at the overall structure and the fact that 92% is based on performance, and you look at what we've been doing of sharing in the profitability when the company does well, I think we've got a very compelling offer on the table, and that's the focus I have right now.
Okay, so a couple of different things there. First of all, when she says that her pay, right, her whatever it was, $20-30 million a year salary, when she says that 92% of that is based on the performance of the company, she doesn't actually mean that it's based on the performance of the company. She means it's based on the performance of the stock of the company. And those are two very different things. Again, it's the difference between investing money in the workers, investing money in the productive capabilities of the company and expanding the company, versus maybe firing workers or brutalizing your workers with wage cuts or wage stagnation in order to go dump that money, that capital, into stock buybacks to artificially inflate the share price, okay? There's this bizarre conflation here in her mind, and I think she's just lying at the end of the day, but understand that when she says that the company is doing phenomenally well and that's why she's getting rewarded with this cash payout, that is not the same thing, okay? Saying the stock is doing well is not the same thing as saying that the company is doing well. In fact, in many instances, it's the complete opposite, because how does the stock do better in some circumstances? Well, in some circumstances, that requires, again, cutting workers, right? Firing workers from the company or cutting down labor costs, right? That's one way that you could potentially have her earning more money on the back end from the way that her payouts are structured. Okay, so I mean, that in and of itself is just completely absurd and ridiculous. I mean, again, you know, she's trying to claim as if like these payouts that they give to their workers, these performance-based payouts on how the company is doing, is somehow adequate. It's not adequate. You can look at the actual data on this. The amount that they have spent in terms of profit sharing, so-called profit sharing with the workers, is absolutely minuscule compared to the amount that they have been spending on stock buybacks in order to, again, do stock manipulation, enrich their Wall Street shareholders, and enrich motherfuckers like her. So there you have it, the two CEOs. Now let's go ahead and move on to some Republican politicians, maybe a couple of you know, fake populist politicians who frequently like to posture as if they are actually standing on the side of the workers, and then when it actually the rubber meets the road, they are definitively not, and use this as an opportunity to talk about completely unrelated things. So let's go ahead and start it off here with Trump, and then I'll wrap up this video.
Let's talk about the economy. And I want to start by talking about this big standoff between the auto workers and the big three auto manufacturers. Yeah. My question for you, Mr. President, whose side are you on in this?
I'm on the side of making our country great. The auto workers are not going to have any jobs when you come right down to it, because if you take a look at what they're doing with electric cars are going to be made in China. The auto workers are not going to have any. I'll tell you what, the auto workers are being sold down the river by their leadership, and their leadership should endorse Trump. The reason is, you got to have choice. Like in school, I want school choice. I also want choice for cars. If somebody wants gasoline, if somebody wants all electric, they can do whatever they want.
Okay. So, I mean, Jesus fucking Christ, man. First of all, you were given the easiest question in the world. Whose side are you on, corporate or the workers' side? Just say the workers, even if you're not. I mean, that was like the easiest layup, and he just completely airballed that shit. That's number one. Number two, he immediately deflects it into trying to come up with some sort of justification about electric vehicles versus gas-powered cars and how the union is actually bad for these workers, and that's why they should actually be endorsing Donald Trump. He literally turned this, instead of a moment of solidarity with the workers, into how can I best, you know, try to get the endorsement from this union to better my own chances personally in the next election. I mean, it's fucking pathetic. And then on top of that, third thing, the point about the electric vehicles and, oh, these jobs are going to be exported to China. What does that say about the inherent structure and incentives of the capitalist system and what we allow these corporations to do? If I was the president, you know what I would say? If these companies tried to export jobs overseas to Mexico or to China, I would say, okay, if you're going to obliterate these people's lives, these American working class people's lives, right, and you're going to ship these jobs overseas so you can go exploit cheap labor in some other country that doesn't have the same worker protections, okay, if you're going to do that, we're going to tariff the fuck out of your cars that you're trying to import to the United States, and you are not going to be able to save money by exporting those jobs overseas. We will make it cost more for you to put those plants in Mexico, to put those plants in China and import those cars here. We will make it more expensive for you than to just keep the jobs here and pay your workers a goddamn living wage and give them fair benefits, right? That's something that you would do if you were actually standing on the side of these workers and standing on the side of you know, keeping these jobs in the United States. Keep in mind, under the Trump administration, as much as he railed against exporting of jobs overseas, we did have net exporting of jobs overseas under the Trump administration. The Biden administration has been bringing some of those jobs back, and the idea that, like, what, because we're having some transition towards electric vehicles, which, by the way, is going to be inevitable, right? This is the future of the world, renewable energy. We're going to have to transition away from fossil fuels, whether we like it or not. How you do that does matter. The union does care about having a just transition. All of that is fair. But the idea that, what, we're just going to throw our hands up in the air and then allow other countries like China to dominate the future, to dominate the electric vehicle market for the foreseeable future, because we're focused on being stuck in the past and trying to rely on pure having gas, you know, guzzling cars in this country. I mean, every single part of what he just said there was bullshit top to bottom and doesn't make any sense if your actual goal is supporting these workers and the demands that they're trying to make. We also had Mike Pence. I won't subject you guys to actually having to listen to this man, but sort of a recap here from the recount. They say, a question from Jake Tapper: do you think that it's fair that the CEO of General Motors makes 362 times what a typical GM employee makes? And he responds, What I don't think is fair is that Joe Biden has put forward an economic agenda that launched the worst inflation in 40 years. Okay, so not responding to this completely absurd reality that the CEO is making 360 times what the typical GM employee makes, and just dodges it and says, he's going to turn around and attack Joe Biden's economic agenda, which he thinks has been driving inflation, which isn't even true at the end of the day, right? I mean, if you want to look at the actual causes of inflation that I've talked about relentlessly on this channel, number one would be corporate greed. It would be corporations using the narrative of inflation to artificially jack up their prices beyond what any sort of internal costs would dictate in order to rip off the American people. So if you actually cared about addressing inflation, you would use this as a moment to go after those corporations. But instead, he uses it to what? Justify his own economic agenda, which is, let me remember, slashing social, programs in the United States in order to further fuck over the American working class. Okay, so I mean, none of these people stand with workers in any way, shape, or form. They are purely corporate sellouts. We also had one here from Josh Hawley, who also likes to posture as a populist. He said, auto workers deserve a raise. Extremely vague, because the car companies are offering them a wage raise. It's just not what the union is actually trying to demand, right? And they deserve to have their jobs protected from Joe Biden's stupid climate mandates that are destroying the U.S. auto industry and making China rich. Again, we just talked about that narrative as well. But I mean, these are the same guys who want to posture as if they're populist, right? They're standing with the average American worker. Entirely bullshit, right? And then we'll finish off here with Tim Scott. Senator Scott on auto workers strike in comments at Policy Roundtable in South Carolina, quote, "We're seeing UAW fight for more benefits and less hours working," right? The 4-day work week, which is, again, entirely fair and also makes a lot of economic sense when you look at the data, showing that there actually isn't a loss in productivity and that it increases the well-being of a lot of those workers as well at the same time. Entirely fair demand. He's attacking that. He says more pay, fewer days on the job. It's a disconnect from work, and we have to find a way to encourage people to go back to work, right? Because these people who are working for the UAW, right, who are working for Ford, Stellantis, and GM, they're not working hard enough. I just watched, probably a couple of hours worth of interviews with these workers. Some of these people are working like 16-hour days where they're working, this job, and then they're also having to go and work another job to provide for themselves and for their families, right? The idea that these people are not working enough and that that's the problem is completely detached from reality. As ironic as it is that he says, there's a disconnect that we have here. These workers aren't trying to work enough. It's the exact opposite. The disconnect here is between you and what these workers are actually doing on the ground on a day-to-day basis. Okay, that's the actual disconnect that we're talking about here. Now, I do kind of appreciate Tim Scott coming out here and just kind of like laying it all out, saying the quiet part out loud and straight up like attacking these workers' demands. At least the other ones sort of like either like deflected to something entirely different or like vaguely supported the notion of maybe they'll get some sort of raise. No, he's just like literally attacking their demands and saying they don't deserve it. Actually, they need to work more. So in that sense, I kind of appreciate Tim Scott there. And then we'll finish off with this just real quick that I thought was, not surprising at all. Here from The Intercept, automaker CEO, who is, very against unions for obvious reasons. He despises unions at Tesla. And he says, they say automaker CEO Elon Musk strips away UAW Twitter verification as the union strikes against the big three. A UAW official said that the union's paid Twitter account was verified until Friday morning, hours after the strike began. So, I mean, there you go, right? So I just wanted to make it clear, what these workers are fighting for, how reasonable their demands actually are, how unreasonable the demands and the asks from these CEOs, from these actual corporations are, and then also giving you another reminder in terms of how completely anti-labor the Republican Party is in this country.